All right. Kevin Porter Jr. entering the final year of a contract. Now, he can be a restricted free agent at the end of the year, but Shams is reporting that there is mutual interest between Kevin Porter Jr. and the Houston Rockets on signing an extension before the season starts. Do you think this is a wise move for Rafael Stone and the Houston Rockets?
I don't. I hope there's as much validity to this as when Christian Wood said that they had discussions about an extension and then they traded him within a day or two.
But that was Wood. It wasn't Shams.
I get it. But, you can get the word out between a multitude of different people, agents, players, teams can get the word out and say whatever they need to be said publicly if they get to the right reporter. I get that Shams reporting it is supposed to mean a little bit more, but knowing what I know, and I've said this from the get-go when we started talking about this upcoming season for the Rockets, this is a make-or-break year for Kevin Porter Jr. and the Houston Rockets, and it's really not about his basketball abilities. It's about his maturity. It's about his ability to handle things off the floor, in the locker room, on the road, and in an environment as an adult, as a professional that you are going to be faced with time and time again. If he can do those things, there's no doubt his basketball talent is good enough that if you can get him wrapped up, it's a great move for a team that paid very little to get him. But I would be very hesitant to be on the quick path to trying to get him signed until I see what he's going to do and how he's matured in the offseason and how he's going to be when the season starts. That's why I'm not going to be excited or think it's a smart move for the Rockets at this point in the season that hasn't started yet.
Why I would be okay with it and why I think it could pan out and be a good move is the buy low while you can.
Sure.
Like Kevin Porter Jr., like you mentioned, all the things that you mentioned there had nothing to do with his basketball ability.
Right.
He's a good basketball player, and he's about to be 22 years old. So he's still a young guy. Does he have some maturing that needs to happen? Probably. You still have Jerry, you still have on this roster a very, very young roster, but you still have John Lucas, too, who's very tight with Kevin Porter Jr. Like, they are tight, and we've known all what he has done in terms of rehabilitating players that need maturing with, most of the time, far more problems than Kevin Porter Jr. has. If you're Rafael Stone and you can get Kevin Porter Jr. for like 25% of less than what market value would be, why wouldn't you lock him up to a significant contract while it's on a cheap term, knowing that, a lot of good players don't really hit free agency anymore?
Well, can I tell you why? I don't mind locking him up at that rate for a short term. But if he wants long-term money and then goes off the rails and you are on the books for that much money, because right now you have nothing to lose and you got him for nothing. So it has been, and what you've picked up and paid him so far to this point has been an absolute steal. So the thing that would scare me is you sign him for a long period of time at that amount of money, because that's when the money matters. Because now for years to come, if that's on the books and he's not playing for you, or he's had, some dust-ups that have really caused some major issues to whether he's suspended or there's a lot of different things that could happen, or he's hurt because of something that happened off the basketball floor, you're like, you know what? That's where it doesn't make sense. Because now, no matter what kind of a deal I got, it's basically paying the money for nothing if he's not going to play for me on the court because of the other thing.
Yeah, it's like, you can find a very nice bargain, right? But are you buying something that you need, right? Like, my wife is queen of that. She'll
Women
go out
with shoes and purses and things.
Yeah, well, I got these shoes at 50% off. Great. Are you ever going to wear them, or did you need them? No, right? It's like, then you wait. Yeah, it's great. You got them on a bargain, but you wasted that money, right? So, I see where you're coming from. But Kevin Porter Jr., if he can stay on the floor, and look, he stayed on the floor the last 2 years with the Rockets. He's been a pretty good player. There's questions about long-term. Is he a point guard? Is he better suited on the wing? Is he better suited as a six-man? But there is a market for Kevin Porter Jr. If he was a free agent right now, he would get a decent contract. Whatever that contract is, if you could sign Kevin Porter Jr. to 25% less of what that rate is, that's to me wherever you're winning as a general manager. I think that the longest you can go on the contracts of his are 4 years with an option after that. So I don't think it's super long term. So what length of contract are you looking at now where you start to get nervous, even if it's a bargain for Kevin Porter Jr.?
Anything over 3 years, and I'd have a real issue. Because if he's only 22, by the time he's 25, if he's earned it and cleaned up everything else and matured, then at 25, he's still going to be a sought-after guy that's going to get his bag. He's going to be fine. But I don't want to go past that point until I can kind of erase the question marks I have from an organizational side about the other side of Kevin Porter. And believe me, no matter what the media has reported, no matter what has been out there, it's just a scratching of the surface of what lies beneath the scenes. And so therefore, I think that unless you had to do it, if you were pressed to the fire right now, I think Ty Washington was drafted with one reason and one reason only in regards to why they drafted him as opposed to anybody else. And that was an insurance policy for KPJ. He could be a great player. He could be a good player, but he's a player they had to have as a backup plan in case something happens with KPJ. And so therefore, I think that, and on the basketball side, let's also not kid ourselves. He's not a point guard.
Yeah. Well,
He's got to work on his ball handling if they truly want him to be a point. Otherwise, put him. It's like Titus Howard in football. Put him at the position he's best suited to play and develop him to be the best he can be. But if you're going to force him to play that role too, you're going to create frustrating situations for him and for the team.
Hey guys, back to the video in just 1 minute. Before that, I want to tell you about Fitz Roofing. Fitz Roofing is dedicated to the loyal people of Houston, Texas. That means if you got a leaky roof or need a full roof replacement on your business or your home, or you want to get something done around the yard or maybe something around the house, they have the best warranties in the business, the best ratings, and the best service. They're going to take care of you every step of the way. Fitz Roofing, making a difference, one home at a time.
I don't want Kevin Porter Jr. to be a point guard either.
I really
We're
don't
on the
think he
same
is.
page there. I don't think he's a point guard like on a playoff team, like a true, really good playoff team. Can you sneak into the playoffs? Whatever. Yeah, sure. Can you sneak into a playoff game? Sure. But are you like an above 500 team that's a real playoff threat with Kevin Porter Jr. at the point guard? No, I don't think so. I think he'd be a really good six man if I'm being completely honest with you. I don't hate the idea of him being the wing opposite of Jalen Green. You have Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr. on the wings, and you bring in a nice little point guard. That to me looks very good. I like the idea of that. I don't know if they drafted Ty Washington with the idea that he was Kevin Porter Jr. insurance, though. I think that's like a happy accident because they traded down, first of all, and then they drafted best available. Like, to me,
He was
it
on
wasn't-
their board.
Right. I think there was more best available than like, oh, we need a guy to get here in case Kevin Porter Jr. fails.
And we can disagree on that. He was on their board as high as 17, and thankfully they didn't take him there.
And they traded down.
Right. When they slid, they knew who was picking in the vicinity of that pick and knew they could trade down and still get one of the guys that they wanted to get. And at that point, Ty Washington had higher value because he can play either the one or the two. But he has the ball handling skills and the basketball IQ and the vision to play the one. And so I think that, sure, it was still a quality pick because he's going to help the organization. But I think in the back of their mind, the reason why they went that way as opposed to maybe going to a bigger player or a different type player was the fact that he also serves as an insurance policy in case something doesn't work out with KPJ. So I think that there was a multifaceted approach to why they got him and where they got him. But I also believe that part of the thinking going into it was, especially when Ty started to slide too, was, look, if we get him at a lower price too, and we can still get him where we're going to pick, and he gives us a security blanket, we got to have that.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure anybody that you're picking in the 20s is like, oh, this guy's going to be a guaranteed starter. It's more like, okay, he's a project. We hope that it pans out. Yeah, we like him, but like I don't know how much of a guarantee
you
that
were in
is.
need of another guaranteed starter with all the guys you got, especially when.
But then how is that insurance though, right? Like if you're saying that it's insurance to be like the starting point guard, like to me it's more
maybe-
hope than thought.
maybe guaranteed starter at some point in their career.
Right.
But early on, unlike Atari Eason, who could start right away,
Yeah.
unlike anybody else that you drafted in the last 2 years in the top 15, you would say those they're capable of starting right now. I don't think Ty Washington's capable of starting right now, but I believe that in a few years he will be ready and have a full grasp of the NBA to start at two different positions for you. But if you know that at the same time it might be the changing of the guard because you might be moving on from KPJ, you have a guy that can slide in and be ready by that time.
Yeah, I think another way to look at this too, like if you sign Kevin Porter Jr. to an extension before the start of the season, one, it needs to be below market value to me. I like your idea of where you're at, like nothing longer than 3 years because there is a little bit of like it has a chance to combust, right, with Kevin Porter Jr.
You're apprehensive.
We've seen it on display. Like, let's be honest. We saw it last year at one of the games wherever they were leaving at halftime. Like, we've seen it play out. And, yeah, I believe everything that you're saying about behind the scenes. You can't let good players walk out of the door for free. And also, I think you have to keep in mind, too, the trade the trade aspect of it as well. Like the way to set yourself up for good trades in the NBA is that you have good contracts and then good players around there too. And like to me, it's a big reason why we don't see very good players enter free agency a whole lot now in the NBA. Usually getting a deal done before that, they're getting traded before that, then signing a new deal with their new team. Bring me a talented team, even if there's some trouble there. Bring me a player that's underpaid, even if there's a little bit of trouble there, because I think it would be attractive for other suitors around the league.
Here's one thing you got to take into consideration, too, on all of that, too, because what you're saying is not wrong, but what I would push back on is say another way the teams look at it, too, is you don't want to let a guy walk for nothing.
Yep.
But it also goes back to what did I pay to get him in the first place? If I used a first-round pick or a second-round pick on him, then I'm a little more bullish.
Yeah, see, I don't know.
If I traded and gave up quality to get him, then it would have more impact on my franchise. But if I traded a second-round pick that was never even going to be picked because of the stipulations you put around it, I got him. I saw who he was both on and off the floor. I got good production out of him.
Yeah, but if you buy a share of Jeep for $5,
You don't want to do it, but at a certain point, it doesn't hurt you as much if he does walk.
But I think it changes the equation once it plays above their value. If you bought a stock of Jeep for $5 and all of a sudden it's a $20 value and it loses down to $1, you're not going to be like, oh, well, I should have never bought it at $5.
No.
You're going to be like, I should have sold it at $20.
But you have a lot less anguish than you would if you bought high.
I don't know about that. I don't know
I
about
think
that.
so.
Like
I
if you bought something at 20, let's just say you bought something at 20, you bought something else at 5, it grew to 20, both of those things fall to 0. I feel like the anguish is the same.
There's no guarantee that other teams are going to want him, for one, but the most important thing is if I give a first and a second for a KPJ, and then you got some stuff out of him, but you found out at the end of the day it wasn't worth messing with any further, and he walked out the door, you would regret the fact that you no longer have a first and a second round pick and two players that probably could have had impact for multiple years for your team, as opposed to saying, I really didn't give up anything to get him. I really got something out of him, and more so than that, I learned enough about him to understand if we wanted him or not, and it didn't cost me anything.
I'm looking at the opportunity cost, though, because if it plays up to the value of what you could get a first and second for, now you're losing the opportunity cost of a first and a second.